glad to have you all here. This is our Scott County Fiscal Court June work session. And remind magistrates, I just hit my button. When you're going to talk, make sure you hit the button, please, so everybody can hear it on the stream. And we are going to talk about SLSPVs. In case you don't know what that acronym means, it's Street Legal Special Purpose Vehicles, and consider some information about that. We are going to talk with Holden Fleming. He's going to do a presentation kind of summarizing the ag stakeholders' presentations and meetings that we did that were centered around farmland preservation. Then we're also going to talk with Drew Beckett about Great Crossing Park and getting some playground equipment ordered out of this year's budget here at our next meeting possibly. And then John Ward and Chief Baker are going to do a presentation, really just give you a big picture look of the current fire apparatus that we have. And once we get in what we have ordered, what that will look like, and then make a proposal to consider another pumper that would come in 36 months or thereabouts. Then I'm going to give you some update on capital projects, and then open it up for magistrates for any topics that you all have. So we got a full morning, good business. It's good to have good things to talk about and such. But before we get into the meat of it, will you all join me in the pledge?
Hey, Judge,
Rick Hostetler.
Just one quick comment. It's 81 years ago right now that the beginning of the end of the Nazi regime was happening on the beaches of Normandy.
Wow. Good point, Rick. I mean, no, absolutely. Let's pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we're allowed to stand up and say that pledge, Rick. I'm glad you pointed that out, because those people sacrifice, and very grateful for that sacrifice. So with that said, I'm going to ask Cam to kind of lead off just what he sees that would be required for the court to consider in an ordinance if the court wants to pursue making that street legal special purpose vehicle ordinance official.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I just handed out a packet. I apologize for handing that out, 1 minute ago instead of emailing it to you. And it looks like you got several other pieces of literature this morning as well.
Betty brought up hello, Rebecca, Betty, and you all, good morning. Betty has some information as well. Okay. I passed out some stuff, and you passed out some stuff. Right. So we killed a few trees.
That's right.
But we've got information out there.
Looks like, in a nutshell, the first kind of page, I don't expect you to read this while we're talking today, but there's a little article that kind of sums it up from KCO. They put that out back in April when this passed. In a nutshell, it looks like the Senate bill allows jurisdictions to pass an ordinance, if they so choose, that would allow special purpose vehicles to operate on county highways. There are some parameters to that. Like, I think one of the parameters is they can't go more than 20 miles at a given time on the county highway. There's stuff in the ordinance or in the statute of the equipment. They have to be equipped with, lights, headlights, brakes, all that stuff, just like any vehicle. It does appear to me they would have to maintain insurance, just like any other vehicle. Any of y'all can chime in and tell me if I'm wrong or if there's more. And the ordinance is written where I think it becomes law. So this Senate bill goes into effect, I believe, June 27th. I think the county has three options. One option is just don't do anything, and then the special purpose vehicles wouldn't be allowed to operate in Scott County. Another option is to pass an ordinance allowing them to operate in Scott County, in the whole county. Or a third option would be to pass an ordinance allowing them to operate, on certain, roads that could be enumerated in the ordinance, which roads you would allow them to operate on. There's, in this packet, I'm sorry, somebody had a
No, I
question.
just had a quick question, because you said the whole county, you're not including inside the city limits.
That's correct. Well, yeah, thank you for that clarification, David.
Because I live in Bradford.
Yeah.
I don't want to get bombarded with people saying, why did you pass?
I believe-
Why did you do this?
Yeah, and I believe the intent of this is, for farm-type roads or county-type roads. So in the packet that I handed out, like the first couple pages is that the article from KCO that sort of summarizes what this is. KCO has also kindly provided a sample ordinance, which I've included there. So that's helpful. And then, like I said, I don't expect you to sit here and read it right now, but as we discuss this, it sort of lays out your options. Option 1 is to allow these vehicles within this jurisdictional limits of Scott County. Option 2 is to allow them only on certain highways, which you could list. And then option 3 is to limit those to roads where the speed limit is under a certain amount. So
One thing too, this Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, they don't have to have their requirements done until I think June 27th, or right at the end of the month. So if we work on an ordinance and passed it before the end of the month, and it goes against the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet ordinance or requirements, then we have to come back and do it.
that's correct, and there's a caveat to that effect kind of on the stuff that KCO sent out.
So, Zach, I have a visual that I shared with you. If you could pull that visual up, this just gives you a picture of the requirements: working muffler, tires with at least 1/16 tread, brake system, horn, headlamps, front turn signals on each side, rear view mirrors, and then federally conforming seatbelt assembly, illuminated speedometer, windshield or eye protection, roll bar or roll cage, red reflectors, black back turn signals, brake lamps, and tail lamps. So I wanted you all to get a picture of that, and then anybody that's watching the stream can see that as well. Mr. Smith, good morning. Mr. Smith was with MLS Power Sports and reached out, and I've been contacted by a couple other citizens encouraging the court to consider passing this type of ordinance. So I invited Mr. Smith just to come and share with you all his support and why he would support the court looking at this ordinance. Ryan Pratt.
I have a question, maybe even for Mr. Smith if he wants to talk. The two things that I read in here that I have the biggest questions about, and probably the sheriffs will have to deal with too, are it says it requires a tail light that illuminates the license plate, which I don't think most ATVs have license plates or even a way to illuminate it. And it also says they have to have a horn. I don't know if any ATVs that have horns, so I don't know.
I have some info on it.
Yeah, I mean, like it's
Mr.
not,
Smith, you
it's
can
not an
come up to the
ATV,
podium and
And then
It also has to have seatbelts.
Betty has a comment. Betty, you want to come up as well?
I mean, I'm just like reading this thing that says it has to have these things. So.
Yeah.
And I asked Sheriff Nettles to come this morning as well, because Sheriff Nettles, you all will be responsible for inspections and then also enforcement.
To David's question on the ordinance, the city could create their own ordinance for that. I just want you to be aware of that. And as far as the horns and everything, I think Mark could tell you that there are kits they can purchase to make them all street legal for that.
You probably want piggyback off. I'm thinking you might want to draft the ordinance if you wanted to pass it to say outside the jurisdictional limits of the city or something.
I just wanted them aware that
Yeah.
that could happen.
Yeah.
Well, also, we keep talking about a city, but we have 3 cities. So
Well,
that
that's a
would-
good point.
That
Yes,
would
sir.
apply to all 3, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
But if we can make
That'd be
this,
confusing for
if we can
Jeremy.
make this where those cities can pick it up and just use the same ordinance would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Mr. Smith, thank
Good
you for
morning.
coming. Good morning.
My pleasure. For those of you who don't know, my name is Mark Smith. My wife and I own the MLS Power Sports here in town. I have a lot of this information. I'll get through it quick because I've duplicated a little bit of what the girls from the clerk's office have done. But I think it'll answer a lot of these questions. Go ahead, Zach. Who we are, real quick, is, if you don't know, and I don't tell you this to make it sound like we're a big deal, because we're not. I do want you to understand the space. First of all, we're here to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what we're about. So we can talk about that after work. If anybody wants to talk about that, holler. MLS is, we're completely Scott County grown and built business, right? We started in a garage in Sadieville. We now have annual revenues that exceed $30 million. We're the biggest Kawasaki dealer in the United States. We're a top 5 Suzuki dealership in the United States. We are a destination more so than locals probably realize. We've sold our machines into 44 states at this point.
Wow.
So folks travel here every weekend, whether y'all know that or not, and eat in our restaurants and stay in our hotels and
Buy your machines.
to buy our machines. That's right. So we're proud of that, but it's also representative of the space. You can hit that next one, Zach. So the UTVs, power sports in general, is a $40 billion industry, projected to double over the next few years. The big thing around these UTVs, these side-by-side machines, is they're social. So for years, if you rode an ATV or a motorcycle, it's kind of a solitary experience. Even if you love it, it was you. Well, these things come around in the early 2000s, and you can do it with your family, right? With your wife, with your husband, your brother, your friend, whatever. And it has absolutely exploded and brought all kinds of people. And all of y'all have been on I-75 and seen trailer load after trailer load of these things headed south, right? You go out there today on Friday afternoon, it will just be absurd, the volume of them that you see. And the reason of that is there's 2 hotbeds for this in the United States. One of them is the desert Southwest, so Southern California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and then right here. So Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia is an absolute mecca for this, and we draw folks from all over the country, right? So Harlan County started this thing. So as the mines were pulling out of Harlan in the 90s, they had thousands of acres of kind of worthless land, and they didn't have any jobs. And somebody on their fiscal court was a visionary and said, hey, we could have people that don't have land like this come visit us. And so they did. And initially they made some trails and they made a map, and they said, you can buy our maps in the gas station for $10. And people came, y'all, from all over. It's unbelievable, right? And, they've built campgrounds and cabins and restaurants and all kinds of stuff. It's their big revenue generator at this point. So that has gone like crazy. A lot of you have heard of the Hatfield-McCoy trail system. We have a new trail system coming online here in the state like every other month, right? Pike County, Martin County, everybody's, expanding in the mountain counties. So it has made this a big deal, so much so that there's now 25 states that offer this, right? That are street legal, including all of our border states with the exception of Illinois and Virginia. So West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, this has already been a big deal for quite a while. So to the question of like turn signals and horns and all that stuff, that's been around for a while. So because we sell to all these border states, we do that every day. Somebody buys a new machine, we outfit it with all these things required to meet these on-road safety standards. And for the most part, where it came from was not somebody that just wanted to replace their car. It was, I want to be able to drive the 10 miles to the trailhead without having to hook up a trailer and all of that. And it's just kind of grown from there. So much so that the machines are changing, and now you can buy them with factory windshield wipers and air conditioning and heat and roll-up windows and all that stuff. So they're getting more and more prepped that way from the beginning. You go ahead, Zach. This is a quick sample of the stuff the girls in the clerk's office are going to show you. This will have a dedicated license plate. There's an inspection to ensure all these things are in place. I'm sure Jeremy's team knows all about that. You go ahead. So I'm not going to go through these for you, but it's the same stuff you guys talked about. The one I'll point out to you, and this doesn't help my case, but it's fair and honest, is that it refers to almost everything here is extremely easy, no problem. You'll notice that what's highlighted there is 4910 CFR. That's a federal safety guideline around seatbelts. And when these things are sold new, they'll meet that guideline. So those factory seatbelts are fine. Here's the downside of that. 50% probably of these people replace those with some sort of aftermarket 4-point restraint system. Those are way better if you're hanging upside down, which is a thing in these things in the mountains. But some of those are cheap Chinese knockoffs coming from Amazon and are not going to meet this code. And so that is going to be the hardest thing to inspect. It's going to be you have to have the name brand, you have to have a data manufacturer. Like if all that stuff's not visible, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. The rest of this is a piece of cake in a 5-minute inspection. You can go ahead, Zach. I gave you all a sample of Jackson County's ordinance, and the way I think they followed the state's lead, and as Cam mentioned, they left themselves an out here, is that, hey, whatever changes going forward, we'll reconvene and adopt, and we leave this open to that. I've got that if y'all want to see it, but I think it's very close to what the sample one was sent out. I do want to point out a big thing, and so the thing that I think we may not be thinking about is this is statewide law, right? And yes, it's absolutely true that we have to opt in or out. But consumers don't know that, and Rebecca has to provide this service regardless, right? So because if you live in Scott County and want to be able to ride in Jackson County, you have to come to the Scott County clerk to get your stuff, right? And it is not eminently clear to them that that means you can't ride in Scott County. So there's lots of folks who do what we do, and aftermarket folks that are advertising like crazy. Kentucky's going street legal on June 27th. And it's a big space. There's thousands and thousands of folks that do this. So if it's not adopted, there's some work to do to say you can't do that here, right? You can come get your plate and go to Jackson or wherever you want to go, but you can't do that here. So that is a thing that will have to be addressed. The other thing is there are two classifications that are specifically not part of this, right? And the first one is LSV. There's a ton of information here on what an LSV is. The main thing to know about an LSV is it's limited to 25 miles an hour. It has a factory windshield, and it's designated on its certificate of origin as an LSV. That is not what this ordinance is addressing. It already has the opportunity to be street legal in certain circumstances, and that's all there. There's a second page of this that's golf cart. Golf cart is what you think it is, right? It's what runs around Canewood and Victoria States, and there is also a designation for those. They have a max top speed and a max road they can be on, and a separate set of guidelines and rules, and those are both different from this ordinance. This ordinance does cover more than UTV. It also covers some homemade stuff, some former military vehicles, and there's restrictions around all of that. They have to get a VIN number, they have to be inspected, all those sorts of things. But they're probably a small percentage of the folks that are going to be interested in it. That might have been it, Zach. Is there any more? I guess that was it. Anything I can answer for y'all?
Question, Kelly Corman.
Just, I assume, and I don't know this, but insurance on that is treated just like it is a car. So if they are in a car accident, the same liability type coverage and.
Yeah, and in the ordinance, the liability mirrors what they have to have for a motorcycle.
Okay.
Which is a little different from a car, but very similar.
Well,
Rob Jones.
That was one of the reasons I was stating if we could make it so the other cities could share the same ordinances, because in Stamping Ground there has been discussion about the golf carts and vended use of those down there in Stamping Ground. So.
Yeah, and you can certainly believe Stamping Ground and Sadie will get less resistance maybe than
Mr. Wallace?
I had a question for Cam, and you might be able to chime in. Well, I think so when we passed the golf cart ordinance for the city, it's almost 20 years ago now, maybe 18. The KRS at that time said that the golf carts could only be driven on city streets, not on state roads. Does this mimic that type of
Like this exempts
KRS?
those low-speed vehicles. Doesn't apply to those, I think, right?
This says section 2. It says that they can't purchase or operate street legal special purpose vehicle on a highway which is located within the jurisdiction boundaries of local government where the operation special has been limited. B says the highway's controlled access system, including but not limited to an interstate or parkway. Or the last one is the United States Department of Agriculture prohibits special purpose vehicles where the highway is located. So those three.
Yeah, so that's my question. And when I read it and it said highway, parkway, I believe. The way the golf cart ordinance read, it was just for any state roads.
So I think the golf cart ordinance restricts
and the golf
to
carts are, and
35 miles an
LSVs
hour.
are speed limited. Golf cart to 35, LSV to 25. So roads that exceed that, they're not allowed on.
Okay.
You might want to read the entire thing though, because it could go back into notwithstanding and refer back to something and then completely neutralize it, and it's really good.
Well, that's why I asked Cam.
No lawyers get you.
And I'm not an attorney, obviously, but the way I read it, the only thing that would be excluded by SB 63 is the interstate and parkways, short of these sort of unusual agricultural exceptions. The 20-mile rule is specifically called out to roads that are divided, by paint or concrete. So like
Painted center
25,
line.
but these county roads that are not, I don't think would apply to that 20-mile rule.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when we did the golf ordinance, we just said all city streets. We didn't just say Canewood and Cherry Blossom. We said all city streets. So you can ride them in Mount Vernon or Indian Acres. But Cam, the second follow-up question to that is in Victoria Estates, which I represent, they are private streets. They can dictate what they want. They can allow this or they cannot allow this. They let them ride golf carts now out there. Is this something that if they wanted to adopt, this would have to come from the HOA out of Victoria Estates?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we need to be careful how if the court wants to do this, how we draft it, and probably put language in there that it would, accept private streets. and
We would
residential
exclude
subdivision.
private streets
Right.
and let them
Yeah.
decide.
Is
if they
Victoria
want to do it.
State's those are
They're private streets.
oh,
Yeah.
David Livingston.
Can the county impose a greater fee than the $10? $10 is a lot of money for what they're gonna have to do.
Well, that was going to be my thing too.
I mean,
they're going to get bombarded
That
with a lot more
doesn't,
inspections.
yeah, that doesn't satisfy the amount of money that it's
Is
gonna
the
be.
sheriff's office the only entity that can inspect?
Just like in automotive, they can certify alternative providers, but there's rules around that, so they have to be.
So if MLS desired to be a
We
inspection,
could,
the sheriff's office could certify you as an inspector.
But would an authorized inspector charge an additional fee to do the inspection?
I think in our ordinance, we could set the max.
Because if somebody else is gonna charge to do it,
It's $25 fee.
I mean,
It's a $25 fee.
It's a $25. So if I'm reading this right, they have to get it inspected every year for $25 to the sheriff's office, and then they can get it titled.
Yeah, because you can do it all at once, you know what I'm saying?
Okay. So before they can get a title every year, they have to have it
the
inspected.
title fee's $10.
The title
The
fees.
title was one time, so they're gonna have the inspection one time. And then if you look on the page where the green thing is, it's actually $19.50, the $10 is what's going to the state. And then it breaks down the
And
rest
that's
of it.
annual, but that's annual?
That green part.
This is annual for the registration,
Just like
but
your
the
vehicle.
inspection is a
But,
one time.
but you don't have to get inspected every year.
No.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Once it's
Well,
been
and
stamped,
The other thing
it's,
that's relevant here, and this you guys probably don't care that much about this, 25 mile world. These things are, as they come from the factory and as we originally sell them, are not vehicles, not legally speaking. They're personal property. They're a coaster, right? So even though they get a title, there's no ad valorem tax, meaning there's no ongoing use tax. There's only a one-time sales tax, right? If they become a special purpose vehicle, then they change categories and become a vehicle, and then are subject to ad val tax and all of that.
Yes, if they have a title for it, they do, and they are susceptible to ad valorem tax. They have property tax every year, no matter if they get a plate or not, but if it's titled, it's taxed.
gotcha.
So I have a question about insurance real quick. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
So right now, isn't there a database that you all, or someone is notified if insurance is canceled? Do you know if that will be the same scenario on this? Because I can see somebody buying insurance for a day, getting it licensed, getting it inspected, and then walking away from it.
Yes, that could happen with any vehicle.
People do that all the time.
But this is more apt to happen than.
They did not discuss that in the KCCA meeting, but that
Okay.
is something that we could send a question out about.
Okay.
next.
So you have to have a regular driver's license, I'm sure, to have insurance and to be able to use it on the road.
Yes. I-
Sheriff Nettles is shaking his head yes.
You have to have a license. You get a license at 12 though, not right now, right?
Mr. Smith, are you the only one that, as far as like licensing and inspection, it has to be done with the county clerk, or can your group do it? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, if you're going to sell them, it would make sense to you to do the inspection all at the same time instead of it. I can see where there'll be a.
Would there be some people that want a
Sheriff Nettles would
separation?
have to certify. Sheriff Nettles would have to certify MLS Power Sports as an inspection facility.
Okay.
But we do meet the minimum standard of that.
Okay.
Just take
That's a
those
new
guys.
law that recently changed. It hasn't gone into effect yet, but any dealership that sells in excess of 100 cars on average per month, the sheriff's office can certify as one person or as many as we choose within their business to be a certified inspector.
So you could do that, and would you be willing to do that?
We would consider that, yeah.
Okay.
Like y'all, we'd seek counsel. but-
Sheriff, Sheriff, no, since you're up here, what do you, like, you and your officers will have to enforce all this.
Yes.
What are do you have anything you'd like to see in here? Anything that you all are concerned about? Do you love it from top to bottom? I know you're an avid outdoorsman, probably have a UTV yourself.
I think it's a good law. I don't know about them on 55-mile-per-hour highways for up to 20 miles. I mean, that's pretty much they can drive on any road within the county except the interstate.
Yeah.
For short distances, crossing over 25, but for up to 20 miles on 25, I mean, you could drive, if it was over the city, you could drive from the city limits on 25 to the Grant County line.
But you want to, to your point, have you talked with JR, or, I'm thinking the two of you get together and look at what roads this might be okay on and what roads this is a bad idea?
We haven't discussed it, no.
Yeah.
Would you like to limit the miles per hour on a road they can be on, or but how would you know if somebody's on a road
Exactly 20 miles.
or even if we limit it to 5 miles? Like, how would you know
We
that?
can't.
Well, no.
We can't limit it.
But the enforcement.
You follow them.
We would not be able to know if they've been on a road for over 20 miles with a center dividing line.
So you
is
would
what it
like to
says.
limit to maybe roads less than 55 miles an hour?
Possibly so, yes.
How fast can these things go?
They're all different. So there are some that are 100 miles an hour.
Really?
There are some that are, 20, 30 is what they're got.
Yeah.
So I would.
You're gonna die.
My recommendation would be there should be the machine is capable of a minimum speed to be on a 55-mile-an-hour highway. Beyond that, I'm not sure. So the way this kind of was debated at the state, you think about it, and you think of a farmer on an old running mule running 20 mile an hour and 55, and so. But if you think about it, these modern ones are no different from a motorcycle, right? They don't have airbags and crash tests, but they're still way safer than a motorcycle if you're strapped in a roll cage. Either one is a high-speed projectile if they impact the car, but no worse than any other vehicle in terms of they hit you. So in that regard, it is sometimes our thought maybe is a little different than reality.
I never thought about what Mark just said. He's got a great point when it comes to a motorcycle on a 55-mile-per-hour highway. You probably are more protected in side-by-side with a roll cage and a seatbelt.
Right.
Yeah.
Those little crotch rockets aren't, they're not going 55 no matter where they go.
It would concern me that if trying to designate which roads, it would be very challenging for you all and the citizens. But the comparison between a motorcycle and this is a great comparison.
Are most of our county roads 55 unless otherwise posted?
I have to go to J.R. Brandenburg, the godfather on that.
35 miles.
Unless otherwise posted at a lower speed.
35.
Yeah.
35, all county roads.
I need to remember that.
So, what is it, Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith, thank you for coming, and thanks for your business, and it's a great thing to have in Scott County.
Hey, if you haven't visited his shop, you ought to get out there, man. That thing is nice. He's got a nice shop out there now. It's awesome.
I go on it quite often online and look at it until my wife walks in the room and then close it up because she says no.
So, what is the pleasure of the court? I mean,
I think one thing we have to do, Judge, is we got to put in there, we got to exclude private streets and let that not be
and
included.
any incorporated.
And in incorporated city streets.
I think we need to wait until Transportation
After the
Cabinet,
27.
and then also I just sent something to you all that or earlier that Keiko is having a virtual session on July 9th to talk about this and have Brandon Storm in, who was the main sponsor of the bill.
So could could Cam draft an ordinance and share a draft, waiting till after June 27th to see the Transportation Cabinet's feedback, and then we can move forward there in early July.
Is there a hurry for this?
I
mean, I'm just asking because there's so many things that are unknown about this that
you all will have.
I was going to say, so if we start registering after June 27th.
if we pass it.
No, she can register no matter
You can
what.
register for other counties, but not here.
Registering when it happens,
Right.
regardless of.
No. She can register for our county, but they cannot operate
Correct.
it unless we
Yes.
pass
I don't
it.
think there's a hurry, David.
That's my issue on the time frame is we'll be registering and people won't have any guidance for what to do in Scott County. I mean, they won't be allowed to until you put something in place, but they'll have the assumption they'll be allowed to because they'll have the registration done here in Scott County. I think it could lead to some confusion.
But-
if you don't have something in place, but you may think, things may change.
I can't help people making assumptions.
between-
I mean,
Now, the only
You know,
thing, I'm not,
that's-
one reason I'm not really overly concerned is like Mr. Smith said, that, several states around us are doing this and have been doing this for a while now. The guidance we've got, is pretty solid. It's not like we're just dreaming something up by ourselves here. So I think we can move quicker than,
no, I don't disagree
normally.
with that, but I think it would be a good idea to see the webinar and
Sure.
discuss those things and see what other counties are doing as well. Like I know Harlan County passed this, they've had a first reading on this exact ordinance. But then there's another county, I can't remember what it is, that actually tweaked the ordinance from the sample. And the sample may have to change because of the fact that the Transportation Cabinet changes.
I would like to see the ordinance include, obviously that doesn't include city street, so that's clear, but also kind of what Mr. Smith and Jeremy talked about, that the vehicle should at least be able to go the speed of the road it's on.
That it's ready
To
for.
kind of address, right, somebody that's on 25 isn't going 20 miles at 30 miles an hour or something else.
But you can do that in a vehicle.
Huh?
You can do that in a
Well, a
regular
vehicle can go at least 55 though.
You can do that on
Or a
bicycle.
tractor.
Or a track.
Well,
Well, tractors are
legally-
exempt. I mean, tractors are a whole different.
exempt because of
I would
the
think.
Right.
So I would propose that we try to look at what is shared on the 27th. July 4th is a Friday, which happens to be the same Friday as our work session.
Fireworks?
Yeah, we could do that. Would you all propose to move our work session in July to the 3rd and do a work session on the 3rd, and we can talk about this again on the 3rd? And, the first opportunity we would have for first reading would be the 11th if the court wanted to consider that. So I think we'll have more information and come back on the 3rd. Have Cam, I don't care if Cam wants to go ahead and
I can grab
work
something
on
real
drafting
quick,
a model and share it with the sheriff, share it with Mr. Smith, share it with anybody, the draft, and share it with you all, get feedback. And then we can set ourselves up to make an informed decision about which way to go on July 3rd.
Can you ask for a Cliff Notes copy of this bill? Because the LRC puts together like Cliff Notes
Okay.
of the bill and to takes out all the D's and thous and notwithstanding and all that crap.
You think Rachel Vogt could help us with that, or
Yeah,
Tommy?
absolutely. Yeah, Tommy
All right.
probably.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Rick had a comment in chat.
Well, back to the clerk's point, the clerk's office. So the 27th rolls in, people show up. Is it not appropriate, or isn't it appropriate that you would kind of let them know that this county doesn't have, I mean,
If we would just give them, if they register one of these vehicles, maybe we could have a piece of paper we just hand them that say the fiscal court is currently considering an ordinance. Until that ordinance is passed, it is not legal at this time to operate this vehicle on roads in Scott County.
yeah, as long as that's appropriate,
I think
yeah.
that's a great idea.
Yeah. And then we have time to talk about it on the 3rd, and then we can consider which way we want to go.
We would also ask if you do pass an ordinance, that we could get a copy of that, and then we could also hand it out to the customers as they come in.
Sure.
Great idea.
My question was just right along with Rick. As long as we can inform the public, because they'll be driving dirty on June 27th if we don't get something passed.
It's going to be every county in the same thing at the same time.
So, any other questions or comments?
You asked what we wanted to do. I think we'd be missing the boat if we don't do something.
No, I agree.
And hopefully, all three cities will, I think I'll call the mayor of Sadieville after we get done today and let her know this is coming.
Just like Mr. Smith and Dwayne mentioned, like, this is nothing new. We're not reinventing the wheel. It's been going on. So I think we'd be short-sighted not to consider an ordinance.
And this will bring revenue to Scott County, because we can see the prices that Mark sells his vehicles for. So.
The market is the market, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some wallets that are a little lighter in this room.
Yeah. So,
and that's
David's
okay.
wife gets on.
So, on Friday, a week from today, do you all want to officially move our work session to the 3rd? And what time would you all want to do that? Thursday at 9 a.m.? All right. Sounds good to me. All right. With that said, then, I'm going to call on Holden. Holden, thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Holden.
Okay, magistrates, judge executive. I've got a relatively short presentation I want to go over. Starting in October of last year, we began conducting a series of outreach meetings with our agricultural stakeholders community, really because we were passed through for this kind of conversation. Scott County has always been an agricultural community. It's important to the identity of our community. We need to make sure moving forward that remains an integral part of our community. We'll just skip to the next slide there. We had been approached, Judge Executive had been approached, about some concerns that the number of land divisions was creating pressure on our agricultural community. And so we were actually asked by the Judge Executive to put together a map that basically showed where these 5-acre tracts were coming from, where they were going, kind of what the impacts of land divisions was having. And so the big takeaway is on parcels greater than 50 acres between 2010 and 2024, when this was produced, we lost 50 what we'd call large parcels. Now, I'm going to point out one right there in the middle of the map. You'll notice in 2010 there's a green space right to the east of I-75. 2024, it's a big white spot. That didn't disappear. That's not a new major subdivision you don't know about. That's the wildlife management area that is now designated. So that's still going to be rural. We're going to be okay there. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
Holden, can I point out though, one of the things that the major point of discussion is the impact of 5-acre tracts. And would you agree that was a theme of the?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that was the theme of the meetings, and how it has really impacted prices and such. But if you look between 2010 and 2024, in between 5 to 10 acres, you have an additional 591 parcels. So that's really basically what most of those have to be, are 5-acre tracts. And if you look at that over 10 years, is it impactful? Yes. But is it a tsunami? I don't know if I'd call it a tsunami. But yes, it is impactful. So I think the court, what we need to do is how do we try to strike some balance, and how do we tweak some ordinances or zoning regulations to maybe impact this. And I think the court has made a commitment in this year's budget to look at PDR, and we've put $500,000 in PDR. And if we did that over 10 years, and we can't certainly say we have a crystal ball to say, hey, we're going to guarantee we're going to do this every year, but it would be my desire if we can try to look at it and see if it's being effective in preserving prime farmland over time. If you looked up in 10 years and you did 200 acres a year, in 10 years, what are you going to have? 2,000 acres that's been protected. So I'm sorry for jumping in there, Holden, but I wanted to talk about that 5 acre, and I think, yes, it's impacted, but it's not a tsunami. It's not just, in my opinion. So go ahead, Holden.
That's a great actual segue to the next section here. I tried to tell the story with really 3 different maps. The first one was, again, that look at where these 5 acre tracts are coming from, how many that we're getting, what they look like distributed across the county. The second one, though, is this map, as you see on the screen right here, is a map of our prime farmlands and farmlands of statewide importance here in Scott County. There's a pretty clear north-south distinction that we're all aware of. But why does this matter to more than just the south half of the county? If we go to our next slide, this is our future land use map. All that green that you see are the lands that we designate as agricultural lands in our county. And so the real answer is, if you're outside of if you're in unincorporated Scott County, the high majority of everything is farmland. It's agricultural lands. And so whenever we're looking at policies and procedures relevant to agricultural lands, it's most of Scott County, not just South Scott County. And so what are we going to do? The next one up, our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan is basically our foundation document that lays out really what we're going to do in the next 5 years to prepare for the next 20 years. And so within that, we add an action item that specified that we need to create an agricultural policy advisory group to begin taking a look at how we can preserve this. Because there are concerns about the 5 acre tracts. There are concerns with, a whole lot of things. And so that's what we did. We sat down and we had a series of meetings right here in this room with that agricultural stakeholder community. And I'm happy to say that a lot of the magistrates I'm looking at today attended some of those meetings. And so you guys are aware of the types of conversations that were going on. And that's where I want to be very clear with this kind of next statement. Out of this agricultural stakeholder group, a memorandum was kind of put together that outlined some of the major points and motifs of the conversations that we had. Anytime you get a room full of 30 or 40 people together, it's not a monolith. There was a wide variety of opinions that were expressed in those meetings. Not everybody agreed with one another, not just on what was important, but how those important issues should be addressed. And so, in providing for you this memorandum of recommendations, I don't want to discount any opinion that is not reflected in here. I don't want to say that this was the only thing that was discussed, or this is the only solutions that could be provided. Rather, instead, this document tried to find where there was a high level of consensus, items that we could address. And so if we'll go to the next slide, and then one more after that. We tried to break down the recommendations to fiscal court into 2 separate things. One is land use, and the other is fiscal policy. Land use, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you out on that. At the end of today's meeting, what I really would like to see is that fiscal court feels like we're at the right spot, that you guys can send this to the Planning Commission for further review and consideration. So I want to talk about those things that we'd like for the Planning Commission to take up and begin looking at. The first is accessory housing. This is, again, talk about nationwide trends, this is one of them. Granny flats are or the apartment above the garage, those types of housing situations where it makes sense that you just need another independent unit, but it doesn't make sense that you want to split off your property. Right now, Scott County, if you want, we have, it's actually a conditional use permit to get a secondary residence on your parcel, but those come 1 for every 5 acres. When we look at something like accessory housing, that might lower that bar, so that if you have 5 acres, you can have your primary and then 1 secondary, much smaller accessory structure. That might make sense for some people.
Using the same entryway.
Same entryway, yeah. And two, as we work through this, I want to be very clear, there's no silver bullets. Whatever issues or concerns, that the community is concerned with, there's not going to be one singular solution that we're going to be able to provide. So instead, again, by looking at a suite of options, ideally we tackle this from multiple angles. Another recommendation that got brought up was to take another look at the uses in the A1 zone. Again, that's an agricultural zone, but we allow for a wide variety of conditional uses in that agricultural zone. Home occupations are one of them. Home occupations inside of Georgetown are relatively limited and what they can look like, how much space they can take up. In the county, we take that kind of cap off. A home occupation can be just about anything, almost at any expanse that you can imagine. Obviously, we do have a procedure for reviewing those. My office is very comfortable telling somebody no if we don't believe that it would be supportive and conducive of the agricultural property. But it'd be nice if we could clarify that up front. Another one, lot sizes. 5-acre tracts, I think, really served as the catalyst to begin this conversation. Scott County has had 5-acre tracts since 1992. So we are basically looking at the pattern of development that you get when you have a standard on the books for 33 years now. And discussing this with the agricultural stakeholder community, there are some that would love to see that minimum acreage go up. In particular, go up if there's some sort of compensation for that. At the same time, there are some who believe that maybe in certain areas where there's adequate infrastructure, that maybe it makes sense for that to go down. Maybe you could have and by the way, we already allow for a certain type of development that allows for parcels to be smaller than 5 acres. We call that a cluster development. But there's some real complexity here. I don't want to oversimplify, but we need to start asking that question. Is 5 acres by right what's right in all circumstances across the county? Or are there certain circumstances where it should be more? There's certain circumstances where it should be less. And I'll go just to this super fast, and this isn't explicit in the letter of recommendation. But right now, we have one true agricultural zone. It's called A1. That's where that 5-acre minimum comes from. That's where that single-family house comes from, and then very few other uses besides that. There's no reason we couldn't have an A2, A3, some form of other agricultural zone that identifies maybe either a larger tract size or a smaller tract size. But that's going to take some real work to actually analyze the layout of Scott County and not just paint everything green and say what's right in this situation is right in all situations.
Holden, when you all were looking at clusters in my mind kind of does, you get the best of both worlds. You get some housing, and then you take that 5-acre minimum, and then you divide that like 100 acres, it's 20 houses, or actually 19, and then one house on what's left out of that, out of that, and then that can be used for farming. So to me, that kind of achieves both. Was there anything that you all, outside of the lot size for a cluster, the concept of cluster, you all still, everybody kind of generally embraced? Is that the feeling?
Let me kind of draw a distinction there. The cluster regulations, as we currently have, are rarely, if ever, utilized. The level of regulatory burden it takes to achieve a cluster development what is it? The juice isn't worth the squeeze. That's what we hear.
I'd mimic that. During the meetings, that's what the developer said.
It's
not financially feasible.
They kept on talking about how could we make it pencil.
Yeah.
And that was the theme.
They
like,
kept saying
Rita
that.
Jones.
Rita Jones.
Can't pencil that.
Yeah.
There was a couple of developers too that I talked to that said,
Sure.
You lose money. Like it's not worth the money. Like they don't
Yeah,
make anything off of it.
The road standards are higher.
The road standards
Yeah,
and
whatever.
everything, you can't
For the same
financially,
number of
they can't make
units.
them work.
I understand. So you got so all the infrastructure cost, the developer can't make any money unless the cluster is you have so many houses essentially.
Yeah. And so I'll jump over to the right-hand column that you're looking at there, which is that we think we should amend those cluster regulations. Again, we have to understand again that we're going to get exactly what we ask for. And so if we create some sort of regulatory scheme that is overly burdensome, we've just said no in a nicer way. We've said technically you can achieve this, but realistically nobody does. And so then what you're left with that standard form of land division. That is what most people take advantage of. So instead the question becomes, how do we modify those cluster regulations so that we can preserve that large open space tract that could theoretically still be used as farming or agricultural land, and still get those housing units. And so we have a draft that was shared with the group. We were very clear with this group too. That group was not the ones who are going to be adopting this policy. It's going to go through planning and zoning, and it's going to come back in front of you guys. And so we're ready to make those recommendations. But again, we want to make sure that this is something the fiscal court feels like is ready for that next step. And so we'll amend those cluster regulations.
And the current regulations are something that fiscal court years ago adopted through planning and zoning. So it's our own. It's not something above us, federal or whatever, creating these stronger standards. It's something we. Right. Yeah.
That's correct. And this is an important reminder. I'd mentioned 1992 is when we got the 5 acres. All zoning regulations are incremental in nature. What was right in 1992, that was a step in the right direction. We got to figure out if here we are 33 years later, if that's still the direction we want to head. So,
I apologize if this sounds like a stupid question, but when you talk about rewriting the cluster ordinances, does that, if you soften it up where folks are saying it's not affordable to do, does that drive more development, which is what has brought us to this point to have this conversation? And or the other side of that, does it drive more development instead of 200 homes on a piece of land? You have a cluster development instead of a mass subdivision. Does that make sense? What is the impact of changing how the cluster development is required to be built?
Yeah. So from a kind of top-down view, the idea of changing the cluster development would be to get more cluster developments and achieving
in lieu of
these 5 acre tracts being
another Bradford place.
You're talking about 5 acre tracts versus Bradford.
You're talking like
a lot of people that get 5 acre tracts want to live out in the county.
Right.
They don't really necessarily want to engage in agricultural activities. They just want to be
out in the county.
Yeah. The cluster development gets them out in the county. It's
provides a neighborhood.
It'd be a smaller neighborhood. It would slow. The thought is it would slow down just pulling these 5 acres off, and they're just got one house on them and one single family dwelling. It would slow those down. Like people would maybe do consider a cluster more than just pulling off a 5 acre.
And the other thing it does, and this is why clusters were adopted, in Scott County in the first place, is yes, you will end up with more houses closer together, but you also reserve and preserve 50% of the total acreage for that future agricultural use. When you split everything into 5s, you end up with a reserve of 0.
Okay.
And what's the minimum right now, Holden, like on the reserve?
I want to say it was 20 acres.
Okay.
But again, that's the draft.
Yeah.
But again, right now, the way it's written, there is no maximum or minimum reserve. You could tell me, you could come into my office and say, I want to cluster my 10 acres. Is there really a benefit to that? Marginal. You know?
But we can't also dismiss the idea that 5 acres is not being farmed as well. I mean, we have people that I have constituents that they might raise horses, raise cows. On my 5 acres, I have hay on the back of my 5 acres. So we can't completely say that you're not getting any agricultural benefit out of the 5 acre tract minimum as well.
And so again, I would defer to the experts in the agricultural field, but
Yeah.
I bet they tell you you're hard pressed if that's your only revenue source is from your 5 acres.
No, I agree with that, but to say that that's not being used, and as well as the tax code will actually say that you can get tax exemption for horticultural purposes on a 5 acre tract.
Yeah, and so let's draw another distinction there between agricultural and rural, too. And a big part of this too, when we talk about it, it's the way you feel when you drive through these communities. It's the way you feel when you drive through unincorporated Scott County. The way that makes our community experience Scott County is very important. And so yeah, again, the 5 acre has been on the books for 30 years. We just say that we need to be very sure that is the direction up or down that we want to have. We're not ready to make a call on that.
Quick question: is there
Yes.
minimum acreage on septics? Isn't there like 2 acres, or the health department has some standard? Or
They can go down to like a mini one, right? It's like 1.25
1.5 or something.
1.5 acres.
It's
There's a special
lower
use
than you
septic.
think.
yeah.
Okay, well that's okay. I mean, it kind of helps to answer that question, like how small of a lot could we go to?
Yeah.
So anyway,
And
But
let
the
me-
big thing about that is, Kelly, that was mentioned, you got to leave a reserve
Yeah.
set aside, because if your septic field fails, you have to have a set aside reserve. That's a consideration on the small, on that smaller lot.
I'm going to add a little bit more complexity, and then we're going to get out of the weeds.
Yep.
Because it's so short. There's a difference between density and lot size. So we can call minimum or maximum density in Scott County 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. But there's nothing that then says that the minimum lot size also has to be that same 5 acres. Now, there might be tax benefits to preserving that. But for certain people, it might make sense that you could go down to that 1.5. So in that situation, you've got 10 acres and you say, I want to split it. Right now, everybody who's got 10 acres and splits goes 5-5 because that's all they can do. But maybe there is a situation where it makes sense where you go 8.5 and 1.5. It's the same density. You still got 2 houses on 10 acres, but it looks different. And then, again, you've got hay on your back half. Some people never hay it. It's just this tall grass.
Yeah, that's right.
5 acres is a lot of land to mow. Let me quickly move on because I'm actually going to get to where you guys are going to be playing lead on this. One of the really kind of neat things that we talked about, and this is going to be a longer conversation, is, as Judge Covington brought up, you guys are reinvesting in the PDR program. Another option that would not be government funded, but rather privately funded, is something we call TDR, or transfer of development rights. That's essentially when somebody in unincorporated Scott County says, I could build here on my land, or I could transfer those development rights from this rural setting into an urban setting. Essentially try to create the types of dense, easily serviceable, near to public services developments that Georgetown, Stamping Ground, and Sadie Hill are primed for. And so essentially in doing this, we would move development and including that development pressure away from the rural areas and into these urban areas. Obviously that would take partnership with our municipalities, but it's something that's been successful in other regions and other areas. And we think that it could be successful here in Scott County, especially when you consider the amount of growth pressure that our municipalities are seeing. So this might be an avenue for them, for developers to kind of cash in on that while preserving our agricultural land as well.
Yeah, question. I asked this during the stakeholders meeting, and I think we just saw it. So, and I don't know that you know the answer about this yet. So the Gaines Farm, let's pretend like they had done a TDR 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The city comes in, annexes, rezones. They can do that no matter what. What would happen to that TDR that happened 20 years ago? Because now they've rezoned, the city has rezoned it from, I don't know what they rezoned it from. I don't know what it was before to what it is now. I'm assuming they're going to build 300 some houses on it. What happened to that TDR then, right? So that farm, Gaines Farm, got the benefit of the TDR 20 years ago, but now the city has completely rezoned.
Yeah.
So what would happen?
Well, so when you
And I sat here in the meeting, I still don't know that you know the answer, but
yeah, so Gaines Farm was A1, so you got 1 dwelling per 5 acres. When it got zoned into the city, obviously now we're talking R1, R2, R3. It gets upzoned essentially, and so it's got new units available to it, out of the mere fact that it's going to be developed at an urban density at that point.
But the TDR essentially then was useless because
I'd say it was very useful because you already got the units into Georgetown. Now here's where I would.
That lane's still going to be developed.
And this is.
But I believe if it was under a TDR, then they've transferred their development rights, and that property, regardless if it's annexed, would not be able to be upzoned into a more dense zone.
Well,
That's the way.
But I don't think the law, because because the TDR only applies to its current zone, is the way that some of the current laws change. And the city, the person, if I owned it, I couldn't apply for rezoning, but the city could just rezone anything they want to. Annex it.
Let me make one other thing, and I think we tried to show this in the draft document, is if you are inside that urban service boundary, which is typically where annexation occurs, we don't want you transferring those development rights because you're already slated for future urban development. And so the Gaines Farm, being inside that urban service boundary, I don't think would have been a great target for TDR to begin with.
But it's private. Like, you can't stop. You can say, hey, we don't want you to do
But
this.
no,
we can't.
Our ordinance can say any property inside the urban service boundary is prohibited from the transfer development rights program.
Yeah. But the way you do that is through sending areas and receiving areas. And so your sending area has to be.
I mean, I just use the Gaines Farm. You could use a farm that's just outside the service boundary now. Pick any farm that surrounds it. My point is still the same. How do we stop that?
Local ordinances.
Yeah.
Co-pilot is awesome. Want me to read to you? No. So local ordinances. So the city and the county would have to agree on this. So if we did a TDR program, all 3 municipalities would have to agree that when they go out and annex this piece of property in, that the TDR remains in place and it cannot be developed.
Well, another thing that needs to be looked at, because we already got some PDR property, and that's a partnership with the federal government, for lack of a better term. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Cam, but legally we're partners, and that program is tied up not only by what we've done, but by the federal government. And those properties, over time, some of them are close now to being inside that boundary in the future. I don't know what would happen, but the way I've always understood the PDR programs,
PDR has a deed change. TDR does not.
Well, that depends on how
And I'm all for the TDR program. I just want to make sure that we are looking at this for future growth. What happens when this happens? Somebody that's out just right outside the urban service boundary does a TDR. How 15 years from now, 20, 30, do we
if
say,
those development rights are extinguished, and we clarify that, and again, this is you can do through.
I mean, you'd have to have the city. You'd have to have the city pass an ordinance as well.
For PDR, though, I want to focus on the PDR, and this is, I think, where this makes sense. If a property has a PDR easement on it, I would feel like the municipalities would have very little incentive to annex that into their urban service boundary, understanding that their development rights are purchased and spoken for. On a PDR?
Oh yeah, PDR is different.
If the goal is to not have, once those rights are transferred away, you would simply enact legislation that echoes and mirrors that level of permanence. With the exception, as we talked about, and was brought up in the meetings, is what happens if somebody wants to buy back their rights. And in that situation, what we said is when you establish sending areas and receiving areas, you can't go backwards, because if you are in a sending area, by definition, you are not the receiving area. Now, if at a future date, fiscal court reestablishes those boundaries and what was once a sending area is now a receiving area, well, then they would have all the rights afforded to them that you guys would write into that ordinance. But again, we're really looking down the road here for some of these possibilities.
But and I know we've talked about this, but TDR is used widely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's used widely. I think it's something we should look at and see, but it has to pencil. It has to make sense for the...
That's the one thing I was going to say. The guys I talked to, from the developers to the farmers, there's a huge difference in what the cost should be. Developers are saying $1,500, where a farmer might say $15,000 for that development right. So I can understand. So I just wonder how that's going to work, because that's all going to be market driven.
The market has to drive it, but there's examples out there I think we can look at that
again, no silver bullets. You're not going to enter into it unless it makes sense for you. But as we talked about with the UTVs, the market is the market, and where it comes together and it works, it's going to be fantastic. If it doesn't, they have every other option still available to them. We haven't removed anything.
I just want to make sure we were thinking about that as we move forward with this TDR program. Is how do we actually protect the land long term?
Can I ask a question? I don't want to belabor this, but so like with PDR, where you enter into that, there's basically a restriction placed on that land, and it's recorded, and you can't develop the land.
Conservation easement.
How would TDR be any different? Like if you transfer your development right, wouldn't there be a recorded thing that says we can't develop this piece of land in perpetuity?
Well,
I don't know if it's in perpetuity, but it seems like it's the same.
Yes, this only works with recorded deeds and documents that are tied to the property.
So if the city or something acquires it, then that's still going to be in effect.
Yeah.
So one other comment. You can buy back on the PDR program. It can be done. It's extensive.
You pay for
it. Oh yeah, it has to be paid for
with interest.
With interest and that kind of thing. So there's always that. You could do the same thing with the TDR, but I would think if we did a TDR and or a PDR, you still want to record it on their deeds to make it somewhat as much as possible.
You know a lot more about the procedure of this certainly than I do, but that's it seems like
I know PDRs you can even buy it back. The original ones, they were set up where there's no buyback. The only way that it can be bought back is say city needed it, eminent domain, something of that nature. The only way you could buy it back.
See, I think that's the way to go. Like with the PDR, TDR is no buyback. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, hey, we want to invest this money, we want to save this land. Oh, now we don't want to save this land. So either we want to save it or we don't.
So when we draft, if the planning commission moves forward with some draft language, that can be included in there to make sure that it's a recorded document and that we follow that to protect it long term. Would you agree with that, Holden?
Absolutely. Again, this is where it's incredibly important to realize that this is only the beginning of this actual drafting process. We've had a number of conversations, so we have some words on paper, but that doesn't mean anything yet. After we leave here today, if it's your blessing, we'll begin looking for a time to schedule this for a hearing in front of the Planning Commission. Before that hearing, there'll be several workshops where we talk this kind of stuff out and we look at these drafts. After all that, it comes back to you guys. You get final say on what gets adopted.
David had a question.
Is this going to lead to a consultant?
No, please no.
Okay. No, I'm just looking ahead, and if you're telling me you guys can handle it, then
I have confidence in Holden and their staff.
There's just been so many questions, and I'm like, how do you get your arms around it? But you all, okay.
I've got confidence in Holden their staff to.
As long as you say please no, I agree. Please
so Holden, just moving us along, I think the court, you still have reevaluate FLUP. I'll let you do that, and then we'll go.
That's future land use map.
Yeah.
Again, going back to right now, everything's just painted one shade of green. I think maybe we should have two shades of green. We have right now in our books A1, and then as a rural residential zone, not technically an agricultural zone, we have A5. The A5 is unique in that it is primarily designed, again, not to be agricultural, but to be residential. Right now, we have some language in our comprehensive plan that says we should only allow it if this or that, but then don't take any consideration of the future land use map to go ahead and proactively declare and identify where we believe that is best located. Past that point, if it's something that, again, the community wanted to consider, we have 5 acre minimums. Other jurisdictions around us have those larger minimums. What if if the community says we really think that this particular area needed more? Well, we should identify that not on the zoning map to start, because that would be an incredible change, but on a future land use map where we identify that that's where we want to head. Sometimes those are called rural conservation districts or other things like that.
And we have ag districts now,
Yeah.
and there's more ag districts than you think. There's a map that can be shared with that. But I'll go back and make, when you were talking about lot size up or down, I think you did by a show of hands, if anybody thought you should raise the lot minimum without
compensation.
Not without compensation. And I just wanted to point that out. So,
so we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Like I said, I'm your guy for land use stuff, but I am not your fiscal guy. You guys are the fiscal court. So as things that came up that were specific really to monetary policy, the group was concerned with it, but that would not be centered around planning and zoning. So you guys have already done the first one, reinvest in PDR. So check. Next, evaluate rural impact fees. Right now, the city of Georgetown is going through a process where they are considering impact fees related to several different municipal services. It's a question that was asked. Could the county consider something similar? I'll defer to you guys on how that moves forward. That next one, there's Ag Preservation Committee. We had 5 meetings. The issues related to agricultural preservation will persist regardless of what we write in our book. Again, we said it. The market is the market. That market's going to continue to provide pressure. It may be wise for you as fiscal court to appoint a long-standing kind of committee that is specifically addressed at looking for funding sources for that agricultural preservation. What that looks like, that's up to you guys. Delayed development agreements. This is kind of somewhere between a PDR and a TDR. This is, again, it was something that was in conversation. We can identify the areas in Scott County that are experiencing the most growth pressures. Very few people are willing to sign away their development rights. That's, as we heard, that's their retirement. That's their 401k. But what if there was a mechanism that you could rent those development rights? Figure out whatever rate that is. That farmer, didn't want to divide their land anyway, and they're willing to say for the next 15, whatever, 10, whatever it is, for X amount of dollars, I voluntarily will not develop my property. There's some real questions related to that, but again, that would be something that you guys could focus on. And then finally, an ag liaison position. This is something that some other communities have. This is something that some other groups have. But essentially, when somebody, this is what came up a couple times, is a member of the agricultural community has a bit of land. They are not aware of what all the options are to them. I guess it's kind of it'd be me kind of kicking the can down the road if I just said, we'll just call the planning office, right? Our planning office handles a lot of different things. There's a lot of complexity. As we've just discussed, not everything lies in planning and zoning. There are state considerations to be made. There's the PDR program to be considered. There's PACE conservation easements. There's 10 different programs that I'm unaware of right now that somebody maybe could work as a single point of contact in this community. Where that person would be housed, what exactly that job description would look like, don't know, but it's something that the group wanted to discuss.
But it would be the conversation was centered around having someone that has expertise to advise people, here are options that you might have instead of just selling it outright.
Yeah.
Holden, would you agree with that?
I full-heartedly agree.
Yeah.
It's just about having that point of contact that the agricultural community could know and go to.
And it might be a partnership with the Ag Extension.
So this is, again, you've been provided with the memo that came from the group. You also had a separate letter from two stakeholders who didn't quite feel comfortable signing the first memo, and so they signed a separate letter to you guys. I ask you all to please review it, and then if it is the court's pleasure, I ask that you forward those land use policy decisions to Planning Commission so that we can begin considering it.
What is the pleasure of the court at this point as far as directions for Holden, to really, like, what's an action plan?
Ibuprofen during the next discussion. This is a lot.
Well, I think there's some low-hanging fruit. Like, and I know, Kelly, during some of those meetings, you talked about the accessory dwelling units. I feel like that's an easy.
I don't know that it's easy, though. I mean, there is some complexity to that, too. What happens when grandma dies and now they want to rent it to somebody else, and there's only access for one,
If I could make a recommendation is that this is not something new. There are best practice everywhere.
Yeah.
And what I've seen in other rural communities, they just implement a owner occupancy requirement. And they say that whether it's the primary dwelling or that secondary dwelling, the owner whose name is on that deed has to live in one of the two structures. Now, if they want to rent it off to a tenant, well, then they're going to be very close to that tenant, because we're going to say that they have to be within, 300 feet, 150 feet, or something like that, the primary. And I'll let you stay on top of your tenant.
But I live next door, and now I've got a tenant instead of grandma. There's things there that I just want us to think about that could be an issue too. Living above the garage or whatever, and I live next door, and it's whatever.
But I think the big picture.
I think it's an option. I'm just
accessory,
saying
1,000 times yes. But I think the big picture is instead of pulling off 5 acres, you have this option to construct an accessory dwelling unit that uses the same, and it's preserved. We're preserving farmland. That's the theme at the top, and then how do we navigate?
You also got to think through fire and responses and stuff like that too. How far back is it? Are the fire hydrants in the county already kind of?
But the construction of an accessory dwelling unit would have to do building inspection. It'd have to go to technical
Review committee.
Technical
how
review.
big is it?
Yeah.
Second dwelling.
Those have to be smaller than
the ordinance that I believe I drafted was 50% of the square footage of the primary dwelling, but no more than I think it was 1,000 square feet.
How's that handled right now?
We don't have it. It's just not an option.
Yes. Not allowed.
People aren't allowed to do it, but they still do it probably somewhere. I mean,
Not that I'm aware of.
But Holden, they can't
there's
get
some
a.
garage living people right now. I'm guaranteed.
They can't get a.
They built it on the house already.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. But they can't apply and get a CUP.
No. So there's two things there. So if you have 10 acres, you get a CUP for secondary residence. And then we require you to have a minimum of 100 feet between the structures so that in the future, if it were to be divided, both sides would meet their setbacks.
Gotcha.
One of the few things you cannot get a variance from is density. And so in the event that somebody were to propose right now that secondary unit and they didn't have that 10 acres, we can't issue. KRS will not allow us to issue a variance to density. And so by us identifying this, again, it becomes an option that otherwise would be illegal under our current ordinance.
So I would like to recommend to the court to consider coming back and doing a formal resolution to present to the Planning Commission to look at like 2 or 3 of these items. And you can't, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We can't do all of this at once. But if we do 2 or 3 things like accessory dwelling, the TDR, the ag liaison position, I think that's what we ought to, and it's whatever whatever the pleasure of the court, but I think in July, we should have some document that directs the planning commission to do X, Y, Z. And that's not my decision, that's our decision.
I'll dive into my question when we get into it individually.
I like the cluster part more than any.
No,
the whole thing we ever discussed.
Yes, and I like,
because I think that saves more fun.
How do we tweak the cluster? I agree, Rod. I wasn't leaving it out.
Yeah.
If we go TDR, I would just ask that it limits buyback, sellback, whatever you want to call it. That, if it's done, it's done.
Yep.
And I would also like to see it be something like if David's been doing some AIing over here, if we can put in there that it does have some type of deed restriction with that, because there's really no state law for TDR that addresses it like a PDR. So,
but I do think the accessory dwelling unit is the lowest hanging fruit on the tree.
Yeah, that again, it'd be a very quick turnaround for something like that.
And I told Dwayne, you
TDR's
shared
slow.
a draft ordinance with us from, I guess, somewhere else that I was kind of on the fence about it, but I really liked that. It really restricted what it was, what it could be, and it was during that stakeholder meeting that you shared one with us.
Oh, the accessory dwelling?
Yeah, and I really liked, it might help if people saw that as well, just kind of the restrictions.
An example
of what it would do, because that kind of set my mind at ease as well.
I mean, how many, and I guess some of these
It can be the same.
they're low-hanging fruit, but are they, what kind of volume are we looking at in the different things? What gets the biggest bang for our buck? If an accessory dwelling is low-hanging fruit, but only 2 people in the entire county do it a year or 3 a year, or whatever, is it really worth our time, or is it really helping us? That's what I don't know. I don't understand, like, the size of the impacts.
I think it's widely used in other areas. I don't have data to prove that, but from reading.
Well, where it's been done, I guess, for the last, 3 to 5 years somewhere, would they kind of know? Some of the other models that you're looking at?
We can take a look at that. I would just, again, in particular for accessory dwelling unit, I would love that recommendation from you guys to take that one up. Because if you look at the complexity of something like doing a cluster development and the regulations and hurdles that you have to go through to achieve that, or the amount of time it takes to create that market for the TDR program, and really get into those nitty-gritty regulations and make sure that it does what we want it to do. When you look at something like an accessory dwelling unit, that's something that's almost immediately understood and applicable and available for almost anybody in the county. And so what is it that you can technically do versus what is it that you're likely to do? You're much more likely to apply for an accessory dwelling unit permit than you are to apply for a cluster development. We are much more likely to quickly move on something like that than we are on reevaluating our future land use map for the A5 zone, things like that. And so bang for the buck, again, this is my personal experience, ADUs get used. Everything else, when it makes sense, but this one makes sense a lot of the time.
All right, thank you for coming, and my hope is to put some thought to this in July, and put together a resolution that communicates to the Planning Commission a direction.
I think I brought this out before in court, and I think Cam and I have had a couple conversations, even one this morning, to take a look back at our ordinance for the PDR in 2008. That's when it was established. And one of the paragraphs, maybe we don't need to tweak it, but I think we do. It says, whereas it is the purpose of this ordinance to establish a program for the preservation and management of agricultural, rural, and natural lands, which will over the next 30 years purchase conservation easements on 60,000 acres in the rural service area. And it goes on, and that needs to be read too. I'm just thinking we might want to tweak our existing ordinance because 60,000 acres is 1/3 of the county, and that figures right here on what Holden's
And it's not economically.
Sure, but I think we ought to. It shouldn't state that.
It maybe set a new goal.
Yep, exactly.
Like over the next 10 years, let's shoot for 2,500 acres and 3,000 acres.
Yeah, I don't know what we need to do, but I don't think it needs to be that.
Holden, can you speak to the RV moratorium, the email that you sent to the judge, and just kind of?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're never just doing one thing. Another great stakeholders group that we put together is we've got a group taking a look at the what was Scott County's RV ordinance, as we know, that was vacated, and we very wisely put a moratorium on that. We've come up with several drafts. We've talked this out, but we just need a little bit more time. And so I believe that was originally scheduled to end its moratorium. Was it July?
I thought it was just June this month.
Oh, it's the end of June.
Yeah.
So on July 13th, I have on the agenda to request.
You mean June 13th?
June 13th.
Yeah.
I have on the agenda to extend the moratorium for an additional 2 months.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Compliment real
Next
quick
Friday.
to Holden. Holden, how long you been here? 6 months?
8 months.
8 months
8
now.
months now.
This guy's hit the ground running. I mean, he's involved in the community. The staff is involved in the community. They're doing all these reports and trying to get all this stuff squared away, and I really appreciate what y'all are doing.
I really appreciate that, and I'll use this opportunity to plug one of those other outreach events. July 8th, we're going to be at Ward Hall. We're going to have Picnic with a Planner, and the idea of that meeting is going to be to discuss historic preservation here in Scott County. And so obviously at Ward Hall, we're talking about that structure. We're also talking about the historic farms and land preservation as well. And so if you've got time, the evening of July 8th, we'd love to have you guys come out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving quickly. Drew's going to hop up here, and we're going to look at a couple renderings of playgrounds. And I shared a map
Mine's easy.
with the physical court here, and the blue circle cordoned off in 4 sections would be the future softball, baseball field, and then that red oval is where I'm proposing that we put this playground. And I truly believe that's the best site, and we're going to try to incorporate the hillside that kind of curves there. And I have asked Monica Sumner with Brancer Carroll to kind of look forward. If we built 4 more fields that are very much needed, we all agree on that, by placing that playground there, that we're not going to get in the way of getting between the 2 fields or having issues with access. So she's essentially looking at a site plan and going to give me some recommendations. But we have $150,000 in this year's budget, and I would like to come to you on Friday the 13th to approve a purchase. And Miracle of Kentucky and Tennessee is on the state bid list, so we wouldn't have to put it out to bid. Now, Drew's got the one that's got 221 on your bottom line, but I gave you the one that was 149,000. Now the difference is Drew is a big advocate for that pour and play. With the 149, you'd be getting colored crumb rubber mulch. You
want me to explain more?
Yes, sir.
There's not many hills I'll die on, especially at this point of life, but playground surfacing might be one. You know, you're all familiar with mulch, wood mulch, so this is kind of like the crumb rubber version of that. So it's, for lack of a better, it'll get the job done, and it's safe, but it's a mess, and it's something that you have to continuously replace over time. Your better options are the port and play surface that you've all seen, or you walk on. There's one right behind the pavilion if you need like a reference for that kind of a surface. Or
what was the
turf.
price
What's
of
that?
the pour and play?
That's right here.
Oh, okay.
98,800 versus 21,000.
Well, I don't think it's between the two of them. I think it's either the pour and play or it's the normal playground mulch, wood mulch, which is $1,000 a year. Take you 98 years to get to that.
Is that different than the colored crumb rubber?
I don't like that because that's going to get hot too.
But isn't that like just tires?
Is the crumb rubber just tires?
Yeah, and there's grants that cover it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cut up a little bit differently.
It is. It's got more.
It's more like flaky,
Yeah,
right?
it's got more
Like-
texture to it.
mulch
Yes.
Like, no, it's a playground mulch.
You're talking about mulch though.
You're talking about mulch wooden mulch that you have to put on playgrounds. You can't put just normal mulch on a playground.
So, what Drew would like us to consider is the pour and play as compared to the crumb rubber, and we've got $149,000 in this year's budget, and that will purchase the. And if I could get Zach to switch to one of those renderings, I sent. That's what we're looking at, and you've got swings, a tower, you have a smaller set there, and then you have that spinner mechanism. And
yes, you have two towers. The one's ages 5 to 12 for the older kids that are there, and then there's a 2 to 5 year old smaller tower. So that's what you're seeing. And then the spinner. If you've been to various parks, we have one of those at a few different parks, and then the swing bag.
So
can we go with the old school one with just the tubular pipes and the wood bench, and you get in the middle?
Judge's family too.
Well, that's metal slide.
Let me.
Yeah.
Time out. So hold up. So this would be phase one.
It's evolved.
Now, before we put this in, JR and I have been out there, and we're going to put a culvert in the bottom of this ditch that kind of runs up that hill. Yeah. So we're going to put a culvert in, and then we're going to put topsoil over it and kind of flatten out that hillside. But what I want to do in phase two is incorporate the hillside with slides built into the hillside, and then a little climbing like wall that's slanted, and then you incorporate that hillside, and then you also incorporate some just platform kind of seating that you could put there where parents could sit up there and they're on the hillside and they could watch their kids play, and it would be a nice place. I'm just trying to move us in one direction, get this going, and then really Miracle can help us design those slides, and if we could put those in next year, that would be great.
My only concern, not with any of this, is the placement currently. I was out there last weekend, 2 weekends ago. There was people parked everywhere, and I'm worried once we get these pickleballs done that there's going to be, I'm worried we're going to need to extend that parking area down there. Whether we put grass, I know.
If you, Zach, if you'll pull up that other.
I'm just worried that we need more park. I mean, I think we need more parking now, but it could get worse when pickleball.
But I've asked, Monica is looking at and making a recommendation where additional parking would, if you could bring that in a little bit. Or make it a little smaller, go down, if possible.
Zoom
there.
Enhance.
So, there's got to be more parking added. And Monica is going to make a recommendation. That, in my mind, you can extend that first parking lot a little bit and still get our playground in there. But you're going to have to build some parking adjacent to that existing parking, and Monica's going to look at it for us. But what all I'm doing is, let's order this equipment, let's move forward. But before we push the order, I'm going to make sure I show you all that here's recommendations about where future parking is going to go and access.
So when you have a playground of this size, what's the maximum, the number of kids that you would anticipate could comfortably, and I'm not saying 3 feet of space or whatever, but I mean, because you could end up very regularly having 75 to 100 siblings.
Yep.
It won't hold that.
No, it will not hold that. 50 probably be pushing it. Be my guess.
And then when we build the other park, or the other fields, then you're going to run into the scenario where this park will not be large enough.
Correct.
With enough So I'm the
hoping it's
reason
a
I say
fade.
that, I'm almost of the aspect of, we don't have the other fields built. So why would we not put a park near the current fields, close to the current fields, and then when we build the other fields, put a park in close to those fields?
Yeah, the only other alternative I'd say, like
And that's
Judge.
more of a question. because
Yeah,
it's a
well,
money question.
just an alternative, but I think if this was like your phase one, like if there was money this year to spend to get the ball rolling, the location's not a bad location where it would be in between the two. But yeah, call this phase one, and then phase two you can add more equipment onto it. That's not
But
difficult
how much more
to do.
equipment could you add into the area?
Whatever your imagination would allow,
Well,
really.
no, because you've got to have spacing.
There's tons of there's more space than
It's
you
running up
think.
that hill.
Yeah.
Keep coming up the hill, right?
And well, even up the hill a little bit and towards the creek. I mean, honestly, it goes
Up there on that upper level, you could make it like the slides and the climbing wall transitions you, and then you're going to have to build ADA compliant ramping.
That's a big, from that lower parking lot to
No,
where
it-
the proposed fields are, that's probably 10 feet, I don't know.
Oh no, it's
I'd say it's 10 to 12 feet up between
It
that
is.
park. I mean,
It is, yeah.
that's a huge difference.
Yep.
And I think the other thing we also have to consider too with this is if we're going to put it there at the end of that parking lot, we'll need to put in some type of crosswalk either over the road or something. There's no way to.
So you have to have a crosswalk.
We've talked about that.
And we've talked about that. And you have to have a sidewalk that goes between those two parking lots. I mean, that's.
So then I almost really like David's idea better of bringing this playground closer to the ball, to this current park, where kids then don't have to cross a road, they don't have to go through a parking lot, we have to build a sidewalk. And when the next fields are built, building another, up there by it, another playground for it. Now, I'm just thinking safety aspect wise.
There's no good place for it, in my opinion. And on that, if you want to build a playground on that hillside, I like having that hillside as you come in. It's got a little slope to it, and like I don't want to put a playground right next to the road. And we're going to put a fence down here at the end of this. We'll have to put a fence at the end of the parking lot, to keep cars away. But I just if you go out there and stand where that is, and you look at the hillside, and then you can incorporate that hillside with slides, and it makes a very nice spot to me. And that's my 2 cents. But we can certainly come back and talk about the siting. I'm just saying we've got $150,000. David Livingston said it once. He said it twice. We need to complete that project, and it needs some playground equipment. I think what you hear from feedback from community members to Drew is we need more playground spots. Do you agree with that?
100%, yeah.
So I'm just presenting what I think, and I've been out there 20 times. I think the best place is at the end of that parking lot. But I've asked Monica to look at the site and give us feedback before we start putting shovels in the ground. And I will share that feedback with you all so you can see and we can make a final decision.
Miracle, there will be rock, so don't come later with a rock.
So,
get in the middle of that.
Last question I want to ask you all before we move on. I'm going to bring back to you all on Friday, an agenda item to make this purchase. Do you want me to try to find enough money out of this year's budget to do the pour in play that gets you to 221, or do you just want the 149?
So, with some of the conferences, I think Lisa, is that her name, Solid Waste? She talked about some of this rubber and the poured rubber and stuff, and she's always talking about grants being available for this stuff. Could we look into that maybe too?
100%. I've got
The Vondel's grant's going to tie your hands probably. Land and water type grant.
To a shooting right here at the New Justice Center.
a what?
A shooting, gunshot victim. I don't know if the shooter's been apprehended, but I don't know if you want to lock down or do anything about that.
Yeah, we probably ought to.
Where's Sheriff Nettles?
He just well, let's do this. I mean, do we need to lock down the building is my question. Let's go lock down the building. JR, will you go lock down the building? And then I'll tell you what, I'd ask you, you just stay downstairs. You lock down the building, you stay downstairs, and we'll wrap this up. Drew, thank you. You got any other comments?
Well, I'd just say they aren't getting any cheaper. $150K doesn't really get you a playground anymore. So future planning, it's probably $250 would be the minimum I would talk about. 500 is one you actually want to have. And like I gave you for Brooking, if you want a real nice flagship one, it's one.
But like if you put that pour in play, that how long will that last?
Up to 10 years.
Okay.
I mean, that's again, I can't get behind the pour and play. I just can't do it.
Your favor is the mulch.
Well, I mean, it's 10, like you said, you just spent $100,000 for 10 years, and you gotta do it again.
That's why I showed you the 149.
And the problem with that is we may not all be around, and the next court might be, hey, we don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're having.
I mean, it's nice while it's there, but you're talking.
What are your thoughts though on the colored crumble rubber mulch versus the playground wood mulch that he? I mean, I don't know.
I don't care. They're both gross. My opinion.
They're both what?
Gross. Be the best way I can put it.
And they're on every playground in America, so if they're gross to everybody. So I don't have a problem with it. It's just wood.
All right.
And it's playground. I mean, the stuff you get.
How often you got to replace that thing?
You can do every other year. You're probably on that park. Probably need to do it every year.
Public parks every year. It's higher traffic.
Yeah.
Than a lot of playgrounds.
All
So
right.
it's just.
And you can. I mean, for $1,000 to $1,500, Miracle will probably put it down for you.
So
yeah, I can find out.
We'll come back to that on Friday. Thanks, John Ward. Come on up, and we'll get this done. And then, Chris, were you saying that was at the new?
Right across the
One of the workers.
Let me go look.
So, John, can you present? Yeah, will you call Nettles? John has got, and I really appreciate the professionalism and the organization to show us a
It's hard to
picture.
keep up with all your stuff because of the stuff's coming in like 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
But like currently, look, John, won't you
Did you
walk
all
us
get
through?
this chart?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This helps.
So basically, thank you, Judge and Magistrates. We just wanted to kind of give you an update of where we're currently at, what's coming in, and basically as it comes in, how does that affect what our fleet looks like? So basically, the ladder truck that we ordered in 2022 is expected on indication of September of this year. When that ladder truck comes in, it's going to replace our 1999 ladder truck. At that point, we will surplus that 99 ladder truck and we'll have the 2025 ladder truck. The three pumpers that we have been discussing, they're expected sometime middle in January, hopefully, if not 1st of February. As those three trucks come in, they will basically move our 09 and 07 pumpers into the reserve status at that point in time. And then we will surplus both 05 pumpers, so they'll be gone. And just give you a reminder, we currently have is it 07? Okay. That we're going to have to surplus anyway. That's the one that we have at the Old County Garage right now that has the rusted through frame rail. So that one's, we've got to work on getting that one surplus. So basically, when those three pumpers come in, that's what our fleet look like. And at that point, hopefully, we still have the Lexington Reserve. We'll take and at that point give that reserve back to Lexington. But we currently have it right now. What we're doing is looking toward the future at this point for our 2017 pumper. Currently, right now, we're good with that pumper. It's doing good. But with anticipation, because of delivery time, our request would be able to enter into a contract because we know once we enter in that contract, we're 35 months or so of delivery time. So we're just in preparation because at that point, the 2017 pumper will be 11 years old. So we're trying to get out in front of it and plan ahead to be able to move that pumper into reserve, and at that point, in 2028, our 07 pumper, which will be 21 years old at that point, will be surplus. So that's kind of a status of where we're currently at, and as new things come in, what it's going to look like when they come in.
Questions?
John, but in 2028, you want to take one of the 2017 pumper offline, is that correct?
We
To
want,
make it a
well,
reserve?
we want to move it into reserve. And the reason is currently, if you look at our fleet right now, we're running 16, 18, and 20-year-old trucks in a frontline status.
Yeah.
When they get that age, you really don't want to have them in a frontline status where you're running them every single day, because it's just, the age of that apparatus, you're going to be in a lot of downtime maintenance. But what we're trying to work on, if we can get a pumper in reserve status at that 10, 11, 12-year mark, and that's kind of what NFPA recommends, then you're going to extend the life of that apparatus and not wait till the apparatus is 21, 22 years old and then put it in reserve, because you just don't have the life left on it. If the sooner we can get a truck into reserve status, as far as age goes, you're going to extend the life of that pumper. You're not running it every single day.
Right, I understand. But then at that time, that truck will be 11 years old.
Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out is what's the perfect number, because you got a 99 ladder, it's going to be 26 years old when we get the new one. So, you use it for 26 years, but for the pumper, and I understand the pumpers, they don't last as long.
Well, they run more. We don't, we basically, as far as staffing goes with the ladder, at Station 1. So we got an engine there, a rescue there, a tanker there, a ladder there. And if we're full staff, we'll have 2 crews. So basically, we can only run 2 trucks out of that station. So depending on the call, the pumpers are rolling out of that station a whole lot more than the ladder truck, that's why we're able to get 26 years out of that ladder, is because it's not running out of there every single time.
I got you. If we said yes, let's do this, when would we have to pay?
In 2028.
So you wouldn't have to pay. You would have to budget it out.
Not unless you all decide to do the pay
prepayment.
up front.
Yeah.
But really, your money's tied up at long. I wouldn't recommend it.
But that requires us to have to budget that for
2028.
Not this next fiscal year, but the year.
We could budget, to pay half of it or half of it. And,
and we did that with the other pumpers, and it worked out good.
We started this plan in 2022, and we ordered 2 in 2022. We ordered 2 in 2023. And when all this comes online in 2026, we will be in so much better shape with apparatus. And it's a credit to you all and a credit to John, that we had some planning that went into this. And, we're not paying $5 million out of this year's budget. We have strategically paid over time, and we're going to be set up to be in much better shape going forward. John is just recommending that if we sign a contract here, in July, August, to move forward with ordering another one, what that would do for us in 2028, you would be moving an 11-year apparatus. So at that time, it'll be 11 years old into reserve status.
Right.
And you'll have a good reserve, but you'll have a new frontline apparatus. So you'd be looking at frontline apparatus that includes a brand new pumper, 3 2-year-old pumpers, and then a ladder that's 3 years old, a rescue that's 7 years old. Like, our apparatus fleet is just much healthier.
Yeah.
And you're reducing your maintenance budget. You're reducing your and the pumpers that they're buying, I would hope that the 3 pumpers that we're getting are identical. So in 11 years, when we start having some wear and tear, we're going to be able to buy these common parts and keep an inventory of common parts so we can keep these things on the road.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the mark, Judge, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, some people, they want to drive their car 150,000 miles and get a new one, or 200,000, and I'm trying to figure out where that mark is. If
And,
it's
and
a
I don't know what the magic number is
Yeah.
to like moving that pumper into reserve after 10, after 15, after 12. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it'll be 11 years old in 28, and I think John's just trying to think strategically and do it in a physically responsible manner.
Yeah, but we got a couple of them that are 20 years old now, or one, at least one's on the front line. It's 20 years old now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they don't need.
Right, no,
I'm not
yes.
saying they don't need
I
maintenance,
understand.
and that's not
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I'm just trying to figure out where's that quantitative mark at that we need to think about changing. Updating the fleet.
I'll give you a great example. School systems a while ago held off on buying buses. Some school systems, you can attest to this, some school systems held off on buying buses for 2 years and then all of a sudden bought 12, 15 new buses. Well, now, down the road, you've got 12, 15 new buses you're going to have to replace
Sure.
at some point in time.
I know.
Instead of spreading it out and thinking strategically about buying maybe
Yeah.
5 and 6.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying.
And I've even,
It does feel like a lot. I mean,
I think that's
just because we've bought so much here in the last few years, and we've taken so long to
and
But it
to
is
be honest with
community
you, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say it is a community investment.
Yeah.
And the last thing we ever want to happen is to have an issue with a.
No.
to not have a tanker or something make a run when we need it.
And to be honest with you, I hate, just like what you're talking about, I hate having 3 new pumpers the same year coming in at the same time, because somewhere down the road, somebody's going to be faced with trying to replace 3 instead of replacing 1 or 2 at a time. You know what I'm saying? It's,
Or you'll have to make the sacrifice to get back in a cycle down the road.
Is there a way or a thought process to finding a 5-year or so pumper around the 2028 timeframe to replace the reserve, like a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 year pumper somewhere through there that's a lot lower? I mean, if you're gonna move one to reserve anyways, to me that would make a little bit more sense and probably be a little bit more financially easy. Then you have a lower year reserve, and I know it's not a custom and built for your all specs and everything, but if it's in
so you're
reserve,
trying to say buy a used one?
yeah, like buy something used and move
Georgetown
it.
aftermarket.
I don't. I mean, we sold it. David almost drove it to Canada. We sold a truck. But like, try to find something used to replace the reserve to save money. And I know, again, like it won't be custom. It's not going to be to spec, but if it's reserve, is that really that big of a deal if it's not being used?
And there's definitely companies out there with that Brenda Lee fire apparatus who we use to sell that engine 11. I mean, so they're out there. It would be just being able to get on there. And I'd say, just off the top of my head, there's a few things that I would not want to sacrifice when it comes to what we're getting, and that's in as far as custom and this and that, but the tank water size. I don't want to sacrifice going any less than 1,000 gallons of water. I don't want to sacrifice on that. All the trucks we spec have the what they call Type 4 front independent suspension. Because of the county different roads that we're on, and narrow roads and the drop-offs, I don't want to sacrifice that on any of our trucks. Now, are there used trucks out there that that has those? There could be. I mean, it's just being able to do that research and find them and seeing what they're I don't have a clue what they would be selling for, but I see what your point is. Instead of having a 21 or 22-year-old truck in reserve, we may be able to buy a 10-year-old truck and put it in reserve.
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of find a middle ground of ease everybody's like, hey, let's have a good reserve fleet.
Right. Or could we push it a year? That's kind of where I feel like.
Well, and that's what
one more year.
That's kind of my, what I'm trying to do is, instead of waiting till a truck gets to that 15, 18-year-old mark and then move it in reserve, is trying to get it in reserve a little bit sooner and then spread out, the amount when we're purchasing. Instead of purchasing 3 at a time, purchase 1 this year and wait several years till one of our other trucks is coming up on 12-year-old, and then recommend purchasing that. So you know, and with the used ones, you know, you never know what you're getting. You know, you hope that what you're getting is good. You know, with ours, if we're moving it in reserve, we know what the maintenance has been on it, and you know, so we have more knowledge of ours. And I guess that's what I was trying to recommend with this, and that's, you know, putting engine or the 2017 in reserve at that point in time.
And to
But there
Dwayne's,
to answer, there are companies out there that sell used
I would be
fire
worried
trucks.
about that, buying something used. There's a reason why. You don't just, you know, 5 years, put a fire truck, something's wrong with it probably, or has been wrong with it. It's not like, you know, how many times have we sold one that was like in great shape?
I'm sure some of these fire taxing districts buy newer equipment
Just
because, I mean, a 5-year truck is nothing for them to, they probably have money to spend in some of these fire taxing districts that, you know, it's not a big deal for them to buy a truck every 5 years.
Maybe.
Hey, John, is it better for that truck to sit in reserves or be in the fleet, be driven a lot more?
Well, it'll get used in reserve. I mean, it's just not it's not an everyday thing. You know, even when we're doing, you know, recruit training, those reserve trucks are used for that. And, you know, whenever the truck goes down for our maintenance, you know, like oil change or tires or brakes, that truck's put in service. You know, so it doesn't just
so when
sit
you pull
there.
when you pull that one out,
The one goes right back in.
one goes right back in. And
Yeah.
Okay.
so, do you all want this on the agenda? Do you want? All right. I see a head nod there. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'll email out an update on capital projects. I had some pictures, and I don't know if Zach can pop up, but you know, that's the sheriff's office. We're closer, but we've still got. And just being real, we're going to try to meet on Tuesday morning, I think is when it is now, to walk through the building again. But the final issue there that we were dealing with the moisture and the water, that's been remediated. It's been painted. Just waiting on a final report from the third party tester.
Those are pictures. That's good.
I mean, no, these are real pictures.
Are all the windows in?
No.
They're not?
Rob, all the windows are in. There's a piece of board. It's on the inside.
I see that wood every day. I'm like,
And
when are
the
they
reason
gonna
they put
take
that,
that out?
the reason they put that piece of board up is they're painting a structural post on the inside.
Yeah.
It looks just like it.
That's good.
Yeah.
But we still don't have countertops in some of the areas. We are waiting on.
Did the glass get put in on the inside?
The
For
glass,
clerks?
the clerks is that's put in on the inside. I mean, it's just some a water pipe that has to be moved, a sprinkler pipe that has to be moved to pass electrical inspection for access to a unit. They moved the unit, but they got to move a water sprinkler pipe. There's just some items still dangling.
What's the video?
But Jeremy had this done earlier this week, so we're moving, but
nice
it's just
looking building.
it's going to be great. Now, Zach, could you go to the EMS building? So EMS has got. We've moved along there. We've gotten sod put in the front here, and it's going to be seed and straw around the back and on that side there. But we actually have had a class in the building. We have a temporary occupancy, but the bay floor, they put in a sealant, and it's just too slick. And there's the vendor's supposed to be back there today through the weekend and has pledged to have it done by Monday. We'll see. And then we're waiting on Chip. We're waiting on getting the Cradle Point and the network up.
They are working on it. I've been texting with them. They are working on it right now.
So, like, Chris, what do we have to do to make this active next week?
Well, so the big thing would be to have the radio system, and they are out there this morning working on that. I'm headed out there when I leave here. I'll have an update. I can give you a call when I find out. they implied it would just take a day to get that up. So we've taken our base station from 141 and moved it out there. So the bay floor gets done this weekend, and then the Ethernet, so our phones will hook up, and we should be good. The beds got delivered.
So we managed, there was a delay on the bunk beds, so we've gotten some temporary beds delivered so folks can have a place to sleep until the permanent bed gets delivered. And then, but I want you all to, of course we'll do a big ribbon cutting and a big celebration, but if you have time to, your staff's out there 8:30 to 4, they've got office furniture moved in, and that's moving forward. And then anything else you want to comment on, Chris?
No, I'm just going to say I think we're all clear on that call. I think.
Okay, that's good. And then finally, the downtown Justice Center. When you look at this picture of the scope of this building, and they're moving, and it looks like they've really gotten close to fixing the stormwater that they had to, that's there on the Washington side. They've been digging and moving, but you can see the poured walls, and then you can see out front there the foundation going up the front of that building, kind of where those excavators are, and you'll have a plaza on the front, but they're moving along, aren't they?
Do they have I don't know if I've ever saw like the rendering of like how that will all lay out parking wise. How you just had a picture of that.
Yeah, I've got a rendering down in my office.
Is the parking on the back side?
The parking's on the back side. You're going to have 2 tiers. You're going to have a staff parking, and then you'll have the public parking that backs up to Galvin's.
Along that road.
Up here on Cooper Alley. And the access will come kind of where Cooper Alley's curves there.
2 buildings there?
Yeah. But I've got a rendering downstairs. So you'll have a plaza out front, and but it's moving along. I think they're making good progress.
There we go.
AOC, if you talk about fountains or anything, they lose their mind. So if there's any other,
they were working there Sunday morning.
Were they?
I just texted out a picture of this morning the pickleball tennis courts to everybody.
So you beat me to the punch. I appreciate that. The asphalt's laid. I think it has to cure, doesn't it, JR, before they can put Tennis Technologies on it. But hopefully we'll get that done before June is out. So we're moving, and I appreciate your all support and vision on all that. Any
and
questions?
You got all those plaques ordered for all these places.
I don't know about that.
Market.
I don't know about that.
You better get going.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
The firefighters got the awards of the day.
Oh yes, great point there. Rob and I were out there able to join the EMS and fire. Was it the 6 shooters? That crew of firefighters. They were awarded the Stork Award. They helped deliver a healthy baby girl at the Sadieville station out in the parking lot. They had like 30 seconds to make a decision, and they delivered the baby, and the baby's healthy, and a great story, and very, very exciting news there. And Stamping Ground's got a new mayor, Jennifer Jones. Congratulations to her. We look forward to working with her. And any other business anybody wants
One
to?
other thing is,
Yes.
if you get a chance to go out and visit them, because they're building a new training deal, and it's pretty cool to see it going together with those Connexes. It's pretty cool.
No,
Glad to give them a check.
No, that is very impressive, and I would echo that as well. So if there's nothing else, we will conclude and come back on a week from today. A very productive meeting today, I thought.